I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to episode 1 of the Reception Perception Mailbag. Let's waste no more time. Let's get right into it. Our first question here from our Discord comes from Will Rich. Michael Pittman and Brandon Ayuk were huge hits for RP this past year. Hell yeah, they were. Who are a few players that could follow in their path and break out in 2024? As always, what is a breakout? Ayuk and Pittman were guys that I actually would have argued had breakout seasons prior to 2023, but they kind of took that level jump. You know what I'm saying? That was the type of breakout I saw those two guys taking this past year. They did take that breakout leap, mostly because of the situations around him. And that leads to my first answer. And I know this might be the eye roll obvious answer to this question, but it's got to be Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson, I think, is perfectly capable of taking that leap. Actually, it's not a too dissimilar case to Michael Pittman from the year prior. I think more people agree that Garrett Wilson is good than they did agree that Michael Pittman was good heading into this year. RP subscribers knew the difference, but Garrett Wilson was wide receiver 32 last year, despite catching 95 passes on 168 targets. That was pretty similar to what Michael Pittman did in a garbage situation with Frank Reich's ancient stale offense and Matt Ryan's declining arm the year prior. And then we know that Michael Pittman was a fringe wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy this past year. I think that Garrett Wilson, honestly, it doesn't even have to be Aaron Rodgers. It's just got to be better than Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian and, Tim Boyle, all those guys, for him to take a very similar leap. So he's the obvious answer. We know he's an absolute superstar. His success rate versus press as a rookie indicated that he is on that elite superstar trajectory. The situation around him just got to catch up. Talking about a couple rookies I think could fit in this group too. Jaden Reed and Zay Flowers, two guys that were stud separators in college. They were stud separators in the Reception Perception rookie report. These guys are not just gadget guys. They're not just create a touch yak players, but they do bring that to the table. These guys can beat man coverage. They can beat press coverage. They can win in the intermediate area. I see those two guys taking a leap and breaking out officially in 2024. And my last name sort of, let's keep that candle lit, baby. It's Jahan Dotson. He's the least likely, obviously, of these four players to really have that breakout season. But I do think he's a candidate if Washington can get their act together. I'm not that excited about the Dan Quinn hire. It wasn't exactly what I was hoping for. I think we all agree that Ben Johnson seemed like he was ticketed for that job before things fell apart. That was the guy they wanted. That was the type of coach they were hoping to hire. It did not happen, obviously. But still, if Dotson can play in a offense that's a little bit better designed than what Eric Bieniemy's was last year, and we know that Sam Howell was a productive quarterback. He put up a lot of stats, but it wasn't good offensive play. Like, that was not an efficient offense last year. I'm not letting Dotson completely off the hook for the season that he had last year, but we know he's good. We know he can play. His reception perception prospect profile was good. His year 1 profile was good. Even if year 2 was a blip, he could be like an Ayuk type of player that takes a step back in year 2 and then gets back on track in year 3. All right, let's bring up the next question here, and this is going to be yet another rookie question. Well, rookie from, it's crazy to say, last year at this point. Sean Vargas says, do you see any similarities to Amon-Ra St. Brown's rookie season and Rashee Rice this past year? This is actually a really good comparison, and one that I hadn't thought of, Sean, until you actually threw it out there. But yeah, I think there is some similarity here. I think there's going to be a temptation for a lot of fantasy analysts and a lot of people, and look, I dig into the wide receiver position more than anybody, right? I'm going to tell you that Rashee Rice was not a full field receiver in year 1. He was not a guy that won at every area. In his rookie report sample, we saw that. We saw that he wasn't winning across the route tree. He wasn't winning downfield. I think there's going to be a temptation for nitpicking there from certain sections of the fantasy audience, from certain sections of even fantasy analysts. But a lot of those people, a lot of folks made those same comparisons to, or made those same arguments against Amon-Ra St. Brown in his rookie season. If you actually look at their 2 rookie seasons put together, Amon-Ra St. Brown had a 60.3% success rate versus man coverage, 80.4% success rate versus zone. Rashee Rice in the rookie report, as you're seeing here, he had a 63.9% success rate versus man and a 79.2% success rate versus zone. And the routes that he was winning on, as you see here, it's a lot of slants, dig routes, some curls as well. It's just short, intermediate stuff, especially. And this was obviously halfway through his rookie season. I haven't charted out the full season yet, but provided that this type of profile holds, it is going to be kind of like an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of profile. And again, here's his profile from this past year. So for Rashee Rice to hit this type of ceiling, be an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of player, he has to become a master of beating zone coverage. He has to be not just around 80%. He's got to kick it up closer to like 82, 83%. And his success rate versus man has to get closer to around 70%, which is what we saw from Amon-Ra St. Brown in his second season. So that's the path that Rashee Rice needs to take to become like kind of a wide receiver 1-ish in fantasy. I think it possibly could happen. I'm not locking it in, but I do like this player comparison. Let's go on to the next one here. This one's from Calzone54. Part 1 of the question. I've heard a lot of commentators talk about how the league is playing more zone defense. Question number 1, does the data back this up? Yes, the data does back this up. Part 2, does this have any impact on how we should look at player profiles? I.e., previously, man press success rate was the golden ticket to identify a great receiver. Should we now be weighing success rate versus zone more? So this is a really good question. Kind of a complicated answer. I'm going to try to distill it down for you here. So yes, obviously there is more zone coverage being played in the league right now than there was a few years ago. That is verifiably true. Any charting service is going to show you that. So yes, that's obviously makes success rate versus zone more important, but Josh Scott did a great study for us on the website. It's on receptionperception.com. You can go check it out. It is important if you're going to line up in the slot, if you're going to be a flanker, then yes, success rate versus zone becomes more important. However, if you're an outside receiver, it is still most important, most critical for you to be a man coverage beater. That's because, yes, while overall zones are higher, you play more zone coverage in the NFL right now than you did a few years ago, but on crucial, critical downs and situations, third down, red zone, goal-to-go situations, man coverage rates rise in those situations and zone coverage rates fall. So if you're going to be a high-end number 1 outside receiver, in my opinion, beating zone or beating man coverage is still the most important thing for that player archetype. So it's kind of a yes, but caveat, I still think versus man, ability to beat man coverage is the most important metric. Let's bring up the next question here. This one's from A Coke 253 in our Discord. We've seen CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown jump into your elite tier in Dynasty rankings the last couple of seasons. Who do you think is most likely to be the next to make the leap? Yeah, so if you're a subscriber, you know I only have 4 players in my elite number 1 tier in my Dynasty rankings. These are 2 of them. I think if you're looking at the next group of guys that could potentially jump into that group, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we talked about earlier, he's high in tier 2 for me. I honestly, he's the one I'm closest to bumping up there just because of how productive he is and how perfect he is in the role that he has in Detroit's offense. Honestly, by the time I chart out the rest of his 2023 season, shoot, I might move him up there. So don't get crazy about it yet. I might just move him up there here in the next couple of months. So he's the most likely. Garrett Wilson, another name that I would throw out there. Look, this is a guy who beat man coverage over 70%. He beat press coverage over 80% in his rookie year. There are really no failures. When you look at players that beat press coverage at an over 80% rate in reception perception history, there are no failures dating back to 2014. So I think he can easily jump into that tier. The 2 kind of more dark horse guys I'll throw out there, Brandon Ayuk, and look, longtime reception perception subscribers know Brandon Ayuk has that potential to me. And lastly, Puka Nacua. Like, I'm honestly open and ready to believe anything with Puka at this point. If he becomes a tier 1 player in the next few years, I will not be surprised because his rookie season was that good. All right, let's move on to the next question here. This one's from Kai_Bourbon Guy. Kentucky Bourbon Guy. Your data grades a player on charted routes over a number of games. Who has been your biggest surprise in charting over the years for becoming better at separating from defenders. Obviously, whenever we talk about this, guys who got better, we have to talk about Davante Adams, who literally went from the first percentile in success rate versus man coverage in his rookie season all the way to the 99th percentile. Hit the 99th percentile multiple times in his Green Bay Packers tenure. So yeah, he is obviously the biggest outlier, but my big answer here is DJ Moore. He's the guy I'd bring up in this example as somebody that got better at separating the longer he played in the NFL. And I wouldn't say this was necessarily a big surprise because I actually really liked DJ Moore while charting him in Maryland in his collegiate profile. But I still say he's the best example of a player consistently improving. You look at his rookie season, he was a 52.7% success rate versus man coverage player, 47.7% success rate versus press. That's extremely poor. Those are really rough scores. Even though he showed the ability to win against coverage and separate in his collegiate days, it was a rough start for DJ Moore. Not all-time bad, not like Quentin Johnston, Jalen Reagor, some of these guys that have been the clear biggest busts the last few years, Marquise Lee or Devontae Parker even. Not quite that bad, but still pretty poor, below the 10th percentile in success rate versus press. Not a great score. However, you see that from 2019 to 2022, he consistently improved. First, we saw it against zone coverage. That was the big key in 2019. That was where I was like, all right, even if he doesn't become a great man coverage beater, he could end up actually being a really good starting receiver simply because he beats zone coverage, and his success rate versus press obviously jumped almost over 20 percentage points there. But really, once he caught up there in terms of beating man coverage, 3 straight seasons from 2020 to 2022, over 70% success rate versus press. Yeah, then we're talking about a guy who is a high-end number 1 receiver, and I'm really excited about DJ Moore. I just gave him a big bump in my Dynasty rankings recently, so he's definitely, I think, the biggest, surprise in terms of improvement over reception perception history. Let's get into another one here. ST Levitate. What are the best landing spots for available wide receivers? Like everyone knows, the Chiefs would be great for a receiver, but why would it be better for T. Higgins versus Ridley? So just landing spots here. I think a couple to keep an eye on. And look, I know they have some good receivers on the roster, but Buffalo, Baltimore, and Detroit still need another receiver. If you want one of these prospects to land in a great spot or a free agent like one of these guys, those 3 are really good spots, especially if you're looking for pure outside the numbers, big play perimeter receivers. I also will throw out Jacksonville, kind of depending on Calvin Ridley, whether they re-sign him or not. I think it's time for them to move on from Zay Jones. They could use another outside receiver to go along Christian Kirk if they don't bring back Calvin Ridley. Shoot, even if they bring back Calvin Ridley, I think they could use a big hulking perimeter X receiver. Another team I'd throw out is the Chargers. Keenan Allen, I'd bet is back. Mike Williams, I'd bet is not back. So they're definitely look, Quentin Johnston, I know he's there. We'll see what happens with him. I don't have high hopes after what we saw from his rookie reception perception data, but maybe Jim Harbaugh changes up his role. So for me, I'll give the Chargers as one that clearly need another outside receiver. And just for like wide receiver needy teams, these aren't great landing spots that are going to get you excited in fantasy or anything. Carolina, New England, Denver, and Tennessee all clearly still need some wide receiver help. Let's take our second to last question here from Def Not Batman. How much do you factor in landing spot in your rookie rankings? I.e., if Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to the Pats and Neighbors/Adunze go to the Cardinals or the Chargers, would you consider putting either of those guys over Marvin Harrison Jr.? Man, great question here. And look, straight up, the people who say that it doesn't move at all, you stick with the talent, being disingenuous, in my opinion. Look, my whole thing here with reception perception is that wide receiver production is so inherently dependent on outside variables. I would be kind of a jackass if I sat here and said, no, those outside variables don't matter when trying to project those guys in the future. That would be ridiculous, so I don't believe that. At the same time, I also strongly believe that we are very bad at understanding situations as a whole and often forget how quickly that they change. So I'm not 100% sure how I feel about these prospects yet, so I don't know that I want to give a specific example with those 3 guys, but let me just spin this back to last year. Everybody after the draft wanted to boost Quentin Johnston up because he was going to be tied with Justin Herbert, which it was a great landing spot. There's no doubt about that. However, I still viewed the Baltimore landing spot with Zay Flowers as pretty good, not terrible. Maybe not as good as being tied with the Chargers with Justin Herbert. But part of the appeal there was, oh, he's in Kellen Moore's offense. Well, Kellen Moore ain't the offensive coordinator for the LA Chargers anymore. So remember that when trying to project farther into the future with these coaching hires and stuff like that. So in that specific example, I still kept Zay Flowers, who I strongly believed was a tier ahead or several spots ahead of Quentin Johnson as a prospect. I didn't jump Quentin Johnson just because of the landing spot. So I think that kind of gives you a concrete example for how I view landing spots. Our last question here comes from Ron. Nice simple name there in the Discord. Why is your beard so flawless, and when is the wine and steak Discord meetup? Well, Ron, I'll answer the first question first. I'm going a little shorter on the beard lately, leaving the stash a little longer. Look, reps, baby. You just got to practice with the beard. And I'm not saying that this is perfect. I actually don't agree it's flawless. I'll nitpick the hell out of my own appearance all the time. For the second question there, when is the wine and steak Discord meetup? When we get, let's say when we get 100,000 YouTube subscribers. So on that note, tell your friends, subscribe to this channel if you aren't already. Leave a like on the video, leave a comment, tell me where you disagree with some of these answers here, and hey, we'll keep it moving. Remember, check out receptionperception.com, sign up for a subscription, subscribe to the podcast, Reception Perception, the show, and make sure to join the Discord. All of that will be linked below in the show notes. Until next time, we'll see you.